Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2024 Mexico Open DFS Tactics show. We got a lot to cover: the rankings, the updated forecast, the top plays, 6K and 5K plays for you all. Who to pivot to, who to fade away from. We're going to try to make it two very, very successful weeks in a row. Of course, the monster week that myself and a lot of others seemed to have last week for the Genesis here at the channel. It was awesome. So we're going to try to make it 2 weeks in a row this week, whether that's outright wagers or especially what we're focused on tonight in DFS. So exciting show. Let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best analytics golf tool out there for your money. There are a lot of great golf analytics tools out there. Don't get me wrong. I just simply believe Fantasy National is the best. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You won't regret it. In the description to the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where I post research every Monday afternoon regarding previous winners of that week's tournament. So you would have seen this past Monday some patterns from players who have played Vedanta the best in the 2 prior years it has been seen. And moving forward every week, you'll see some course research, pattern of winners and the players who qualify that are in the field that week. So if you want to see that research every week, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my betting cards and my weekly or top player exposure for the DFS contests I play. That'll come out after the show this evening, later on after the DFS Tactics show. So if you want to see that, give me a follow over at X. And then lastly, for social media, Gabe's social media handle is in the description. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. It's a great way to start your research every week. And like myself, he had a monster week last week, having not one but 2 top 20 lineups in a DFS contest, a pretty well-paying DFS contest. So well deserved in his own right. So go show Gabe some support. Follow him over on social media and subscribe to that article. It is free to do, by the way, to subscribe to that article, because if you do, you're going to be able to join us in his Substack chat, as he is gracious enough to host me over there after calls in the DFS Tactics show on Wednesday nights. So go show Gabe some support and follow him over on social media. And then lastly, we're live. Chat is open. Want to hear from you all. In addition to the poll question, which I still need to type up, in addition to the poll question, which I want to hear from you all, who are you targeting? Who are you fading away from this week? How different do you think Vedanta is going to play this week, considering it is a different time of the schedule than it has been in its first 2 iterations? So we'd love to hear from you all in that regard. But let's not waste any more time. Let's figure out our strategies and our tactics for the 2024 Mexico Open. And we're going to start on a Wednesday evening over at Windfinder. And hopefully my camera will focus in here. Get out of the way. Let it focus. And might have to do some adjustments here. But anyway, let me type up this poll question here very quickly. And I need to double check a couple of things here. So we've got 5 players. I'm going to take out probably Thorbjorn. All right, so let me type this up again. Apologies. Just coming back from a co-ed wiffle ball game. Who, if any, of these players are you using in one and done? We have Tony Finau. I'll go Emiliano Grillo, Thomas Dietrich, and I think Højgaard and then Dietrich. So Nikolai Højgaard and Thomas Dietrich. So we'll start this poll. Who, if any, of these players are you using in one and done? I would like to have added a 5th option for other, but just trying to get 4 what I think are the most likely names up there. Are you using Tony Finau? He seems like the overwhelmingly obvious choice, but the very chalky one, so you're not going to gain a whole lot on your fellow one-and-done contestants if you're playing one-and-done. So be interested to hear from you all, and of course I will give you my one-and-done pick at the end of the show. All right, so let's cover this forecast here very, very quickly. You see Thursday tomorrow, not a whole lot. Now the wind generally does pick up in the afternoons, so I would not be surprised to see wind in the maybe low double digits, maybe in the 10 to 12 mile an hour range. We saw that happen at the Genesis. The winds picked up in the afternoons a couple of those days when they weren't projected to, but overall, you see Thursday, very light, calm. Friday, very light and calm. So no wave stack or no half of the draw seems to have the benefit. It looks pretty similar each way, and it's very calm. So I would just play your guys who you think are going to be best suited for Vedanta this week. And then if we zoom out, look at Saturday and Sunday, much more the same. Calm in the morning. Could pick up maybe a little bit into the maybe 10 to 12 mile an hour range in the afternoon, but no wave stack, just a week to play your guys. So with that, we're going to move to Fantasy National, and you see that I've got already some filters applied here. Let me unstar these players since I was grabbing the ownership projections. So let me unstar these players for you all. I have not seen any other field changes, so feel free to jump in chat and correct that if you have seen other field changes. But we're going to do a couple of quick reviews here. In the last 2 years, on paspalum surfaces or on paspalum green courses, we're not going to do anything with putting. We're just going to look at total performance. Your top total performers on courses with paspalum greens in the past 2 years: Tony Finau, Brandon Wu, Nate Lashley, Sam Stevens, Carson Young, Cameron Champ, Harry Hall, Michael Kim, Alex Smalley, Vincent Norman, and Kevin Chappell. Moving a little bit further on down here, you've got Højgaard and Justin Suh, Johnny Vegas, Nico Echeverria, Ramey, Dietrich, EVR, Palmer, Novak. There's your top 20. So give these guys a decent boost in your considerations if you're finalizing your lineups, or if you're trying to choose between a couple of players. Make sure to give these players a decent little boost, as they have been the best on paspalum surfaces over the past couple of years. The other end of the spectrum, players who have not played well on paspalum: Carl Yuan, Charlie Hoffman has been really bad on paspalum, Bronson Burgoon, Robbie Shelton, Harrison Endicott, Mav McNeely, Eric Barnes. It's only one tournament, but he did not play it well. Vincent Whaley, JJ Spawn, Peter Malnati, so on and so forth. You can see there. So there's a look at your top performers and worst performers on paspalum surfaces. The only other quick filter we'll take a look at, we're going to look at long courses, and we're going to talk a lot about long courses this evening. Vedanta is close to 7,500 yards. It's going to play the entirety of that 7,500 yards for reasons we'll get into. But on courses that are long, defined as over 7,400 yards, your top performers in the past 2 years have been Sam Stevens, Nate Lashley, Nikolai Højgaard, Michael Kim, Kevin Chappell, Nico Echeverria, Tony Finau, Harry Hall, Jake Knapp, Johnny Vegas. There's your top 10, and a whole lot of overlap here between paspalum and long courses. So that'll give you an idea on some of the players that I'm really keyed in on this week. Moving a little bit further on down, JJ Spawn and Dietrich, Novak, Aaron Baddeley, Brandon Wu, Josh Teeter, Hayden Springer, only a couple of rounds, Austin Eckroat, Parker Cootie, Scott Piercy. So there's a look at your top 20 in terms of player performance on long courses. At the other end of the spectrum, players who have not: Paul Barjon, Garrick Higo, Ches Reavie, James Hahn, Charlie Hoffman, Davis Riley, Patton Gazire, Tyson Alexander, Taylor Pendrith, who's pretty darn popular this week. He's not been good on long courses. Harrison Endicott, Eric Van Rooyen, so on and so forth. So there's a look at your top performers and worst performers when it's long. And the reason why I am emphasizing that this course is going to play every bit of its yardage, the first two iterations of the Mexico Open were always played in early May after the Masters. So it's definitely a different portion of the year, calendar year. It's much warmer down in Puerto Vallarta. There's been a little bit of talk, at least from those, in the industry, if you will, how the course is playing extra long this week because it's much softer. It's earlier in the year. The grass hasn't, grown out. It's not as warm. Balls aren't rolling out as far. So we're going to get a course that's going to play to its true full 7,500 yards, especially since there's not a whole lot of elevation change. This is one of the flattest courses there are on the PGA Tour. So it's going to really play to its full length. So anyway, enough of that. Let's go ahead and jump straight into the mixed condition model that I have made for this evening and for the Mexico Open this week. We're going to start off with all of the ball striking, and I mentioned how I've been focused on the ball striking all week. I don't think around the green is going to play a big factor at all. You'll notice that I don't have any putting in here. The only paspalum putting we have is from Vedanta. So instead of bringing in that data, I just have a couple of things off to the side here. The first being the comparison course chart. And if you aren't familiar with that, I ask that you check out my show from Monday night, where I went pretty in-depth with the comparison course chart in these paspalum courses, these Caribbean courses. So I've got that up, but I just don't feel comfortable putting putting statistics in here since it's only from Vedanta. And that's why I'm using a little bit of the strokes gained total ranking from paspalum on this comparison course chart for our purposes later this evening. But to get into the mixed condition model proper, 15% off the tee, and if anything, I might be a little light here. I mentioned Monday night that I was going to swap the approach and off the tee percentage. Last year I had 20% in off the tee, 15% in approach. Mentioned I was going to swap it. I did. And then hearing about how soft the course is, if anything, this is a little bit light. This could go, you could justify easily going 20% here. But I did want to focus on the approach. Since the course is much softer, I figured the players are going to be a bit more aggressive, attacking pins and whatnot. So 15% off the tee, 20% approach, just a heavy emphasis in ball striking. 5% on driving distance on courses over 7,400 yards. And again, this could be a little bit light. I could absolutely envision going to 10% on this, considering the reports that we've gotten, but considering the heavy emphasis in ball striking that I have, and I wanted to make sure I added some metrics later on down. I only had 5% left for the driving distance. So 5% in driving distance on long courses. If anything, again, I think this is a little light. 10% in greens on long courses. We saw in the prior leaderboards Monday night that greens are just a big deal here. Even though these greens are big, you're coming in with these very long irons. So greens in regulation are not all that easy to hit here at Vedanta. So I wanted to see who hits greens, especially on long courses. 10% bogey avoidance on long courses. We saw that bogey avoidance was a very, very consistent metric the first 2 years here at Vedanta. So, and this is not going to be a birdie fest. I truly believe that. I will argue with anybody out there who thinks this is going to be a birdie fest. I just don't see it that way. The course is going to be extremely long. It is going to be a little soft, but extremely long. It's not an easy course to begin with. So 10% in bogey avoidance. You'll notice that I don't have any opportunities or birdies or better gained. Opportunities gained was the last metric that I cut to acclimate or accommodate the percentages that I want in the mixed condition model. So the opportunities gained was the last metric that I cut. But greens and bogey avoidance on long courses. You see 3 metrics here where I'm using the long course filter. I just think that's going to be most appropriate to use this week for Vedanta. 5% in the 2 longest proximities. Now this is where I am going to be a little bit different than a lot of others, I think, because the data has shown that the 175 to 200 has been the most important range of proximity here, despite the enormous amount of approach shots that come from 200 plus. So I didn't want to ignore that. 40% of the approach shots come from 200 plus here. I did not want to ignore that, but the data is supporting that we look at the 175 to 200. So I'm also putting 5% there as well. To finalize the mixed condition model, 10% in par 3s. I wanted to put 15% in here, but I had to back it off partly to include, this kind of alternate or my skew, my tangent this week. So 10% in par 3s, only 5% in total par 4s, only 5% in the length of par 4s that are most prevalent here, 450 to 500. The par 4s just are mitigated. They are not as important as usual PGA Tour courses. Remember, there are 5 par 3s, and you have your full allotment of 4 par 5s. So there are not too many par 4s on this course. That's why the mitigation of the decrease in value in the par 4s. And then finally, 10% on par 5s. And you'll notice that I did not separate a range on the par 3s or the par 5s. Quite honestly, you could make an argument not to look at the 450 to 500 par 4s by themselves at all either. I did because they were very predictive last year. They were the most predictive metric of the ones that I brought into the mixed condition model last year. So going to use that angle again this year, and hopefully they will be as predictive. There is the mixed condition model for this week. Areas where I'll be weak. If you wanted to put some past Palom putting data, it would all be from Vedanta, but that is the course we're at, so I could understand if you wanted to put some putting data in here. I don't know around the green if it plays well. Where I really think this could be a little weak, I think the distance and off the tee needs to be improved or increased in percentage. I really do, considering how soft the course is supposedly playing from the players' talk of it this week. And of course, if my gut feeling of 175 to 200 is incorrect, if we need to put more in the 200 plus, if there's a specific range of par 3s or par 5s that matter more, I'll be weak. But really, we're taking a lot of the success from last year's mixed condition model, bringing it over to this year, just moving some percentages around. So with all that said, let's go ahead and move to Microsoft Excel and the reveal of my rankings for this week's Mexico Open. Let me change the view for you all. There we go. My rankings go as such. As soon as I feel like I have a bajillion spreadsheets up, because I also have Gabe's source of projected ownerships up and all that. So apologies. Let me get all this sorted. My rankings for this week's Mexico Open go as such. I have Tony Finau, number 1. Stefan Jaeger, Michael Kim, Joseph Bramlett, and Nate Lashley round out my top 5. Doug Gim, Mark Hubbard, Nikolai Højgaard, Brandon Wu, and Carson Young finalize my top 10. I did not put a whole lot of emphasis into course value. Again, this is the attempt at giving a player a numerical value based on how well they have played that course in the past 5 years. Of course, Vedanta's only been 2 years. I didn't put a whole lot of weight there But I did not want to ignore it, because if you went and saw my research on Monday on social media, there is a small amount of correlation. And granted, it's a very small sample size, only 2 years, but very small amount of correlation here with the players who have made the cut, and then they really performed well that next year. So there is still a little bit there. As a reminder for returning viewers, and for your information if you are a new viewer, my rankings are based on 3 criteria: the FNGC rank, which is a numerical value based on the mixed condition model that we just went over with the metrics and the percentages in those. Course value, I just explained what that is. And then we are playing DFS, so we're trying to find unique options. So projected ownership per Fantasy National also accounts to my rankings. All right, not a whole lot of surprise here, other than maybe Michael Kim rising as far or as high as he did. Look, 63 is his highest or worst number. He does not have a bad statistic. Even Tony Finau has one horrendous statistic in here. Michael Kim doesn't have a bad statistic across, so he's really catapulting in these rankings. Don't know if I would have him third, but I do like Michael Kim a little bit this week. Joseph Bramlett has been very good here and on these comparison courses. Nate Lashley was the #1 player on these comparison courses. A lot to like there. Doug Gim, anytime you don't factor in putting, he's going to rise. And of course, talked all week how he has been essentially the #1 ball striker across these 2 categories. 10th in the approach, 5th and off the tee. Højgaard has played decently well here last year. Brandon Wu has torn up Vedanta, 2nd and a 3rd. Carson Young's been good here. So there's a look at my rankings. Again, no real surprise as to who's in the top 10. You can always argue the ordering and whatnot. But let's sort on the price board, sort on these salaries, figure out where our fellow contestants seem to be going with their lineups, and of course figure out where the best pivots are and who to fade. So again, thanks to Gabe for sending over his source, or his secondary source of ownerships. I go strictly by Fantasy National, but always good to have more information, so I'll share that with you all. In the 5 digits, in the 10Ks, we have 5 players this week. We have Tony Finau at 12,000, Emiliano Grillo at 11,100, Nikolai Højgaard at 10,700, Thorbjorn Olesen at 10,300, and Thomas Dietrich at 10,100. Now, Olesen's getting hurt a little bit because he has played in some very tough tournaments, as in the majors. Hasn't performed all the best in there. He is a very good DP World Tour player, so I would be much higher, or I am higher on Olesen than what this is showing. Again, he's just played in majors and it's been tough. That's what he doesn't have the greatest statistics because of that. But there are a couple of things I want to point to you that signify that he could be good here. He takes advantage of par 5s. He's top 15 in this field in par 5s. And he's a very good long iron player. Top 20 and 200 plus. So I wanted to start the 10Ks with Thorbjorn Olesen because there's not a lot of data on him, and I'm a little bit higher on him than what it might suggest. But otherwise, I'm completely out on Emiliano Grillo. The irons have not been good. He is known as a ball striker, and the irons have not been good, especially since his win last year. The off tee is kind of middling. He does play par 3s well, and there are 5 of them here, but he lacks some distance. He does. He lacks a little bit of distance, and his long irons have not been good in the last 36 rounds. You're not going to be able to play everybody, so my big stand, or my bold stand, is I'm going to full fade Emiliano Grillo. I love Tony Finau. He is much higher than the 20%. He is projected at 33% per Gabe's source. I would think more so in the 30%, but even so, that is chalk I'm going to eat. He's finished 2nd and 1st here, or maybe it's 3rd and 1st. He just loves Vedanta. The course is made for him. It's a very good fit. And there's a lot to like. Obviously, third in irons, third in greens when it's long. The only bad statistic, and this is horrendous, he's not been good at par threes. So take that what you will, but still plenty enough to like with Tony Finau. He's just going to be extremely popular, and you're going to have to go down into the sixes and maybe even the fives to play him if you're going to get any uniqueness out of him or out of your lineup. But I do think I have a couple of 5K plays and several sixes for you all. But anyway, I like Tony Finau. There's no reason for me not to use him. Højgaard is going to be pretty darn popular, but for good reason. He likes playing these longer courses. Greens, top 5, second in bogey avoidance on long courses. You think about major championships, those are generally on long courses, and he plays longer courses well. Par 3s, he's the number 1 driving distance player. When driver is in your hand or is forced in players' hands, he is the number 1 distance player in this field. His one glaring statistic that looks like it could be an issue is the 200 plus. He's a much better player than 200 plus in my opinion. So I'll be using some Højgaard as well. Olesen I like, and he's kind of intriguing. He's at 12% per Gabe's source. If he's at 12%, I'd be much less interested. It's really the extreme uniqueness on Olesen that I'd be interested in. And Thomas Dietrich's fine. He's a much better iron player than what's been showing. He's played these past Palom courses very well. He's got plenty of distance, takes advantage of par 5s. I like Dietrich. 15.5% per Gabe source, 14% per Fantasy National. So he's not exactly unique by any means, but you can't argue the form he's in either. It's fine. I think I like some others a little bit more under him, but it's fine. It's a decent play. So in the 10Ks, look, I know he's expensive. I know he's going to be the most popular player. I am going to make Tony Finau the number 1 player in the 5Ks. Just extremely confident that he's going to play well this week. I will make Dietrich number 2. The combination of the cheaper price and a lot less ownership than Højgaard. I'll make Dietrich number 2. He's been very good at these past Palom or these Caribbean courses. I'll make Højgaard 3rd only because Olesen is a pure wild card, in which I know I'm pretty confident I know what I'm getting in Højgaard. He's just so very popular. I'll make Olesen 4th, and I think he's very intriguing in the 10Ks. And I'm full fading Emiliano Grillo. So there you go. Moving to the 9s. Keith Mitchell, Stephan Jaeger, Patrick Rogers, Taylor Pendrith, EVR, Mackenzie Hughes, Ryan Fox, Rio Hitsatsune, Brandon Wu, and Mark Hubbard. Look, I generally focus on Keith Mitchell when it's difficult. This is definitely not going to be difficult per se. His irons haven't been great, and you notice that he kind of struggles with longer courses. Now he's got plenty of distance, but you think about his top performances, especially like a place where we'll be next week, what used to be the Honda, now the Cognizant Classic. That's a shorter course. It's very difficult, but shorter. So Keith Mitchell's another one of these players that I'm probably going to shy away from. The combination of the iron play or the lack of iron play recently, the not too stellar performance on long courses. Mitchell and Grillo are the 2 players in the top portion of the price board that I'm completely out on. So Jaeger, I'm all in. This is more chalk I'll eat. Jaeger's sitting at 19.5 per Gabe source, 21.5 here at Fantasy National. So you're looking at a player that's going to be 20% or more easily, but everything lines up for him except for this bogey avoidance on long courses. But top 25 in irons, top 10 off the tee, top 5 on par 5s. Very good at the 2 proximities that we brought in. I really like Stephan Jaeger. You'll see him quite a bit later on social media with the betting card and in the DFS or top player exposure. Love Stephan Jaeger. I might actually make him the number 1 player in my rankings over Tony Finau because of the ownership discount. I mean, he's a full 10% projected less than Tony Finau per Gabe's source. It's close. I mean, Finau's going to be really good, I think, too. But I really like Stefan Jaeger, and this is chalk I'll eat. Rogers is fine. I do have a little bit of concern with Patrick Rogers, but he's played very, very well here. So take that for what you will. A little bit more lukewarm on Patrick Rogers. Really like Taylor Pendrith. A lot of people do, as you can see. Pendrith 15.5 per Gabe source, 22% per Fantasy National. Now, he has struggled with long courses, but I think this is more due to the fact that he was dealing with some injury, with some back injuries, or back issues, I should say, a couple of years ago and last year. I think he's fully healthy now. I do like Taylor Pendrith at a course like this that is very, very forgiving off the tee. Should suit well for the fact that he devours par fives. He's got plenty of distance, and he's also pretty darn good at the two very long proximities. So I like Taylor Pendrith quite a bit. EVR is going to be pretty popular. Of course, his win at El Diamante, Tigers course in the fall. I can take it or leave it. You know, if he happens to fall into a lineup or two, if I feel like I have too much Jaeger or too much Pendrith, I don't mind using Van Rooyen a time or two, but I just can't get excited around a 13, 14%, 15% Eric Van Rooyen. I just can't get there on being excited about it, but it's probably a solid play. I don't want any part of Mackenzie Hughes. You see Fantasy National members aren't there. He's going to be very unique. I just don't see this as a good fit for Mackenzie Hughes at all. You can see just the heavy red in ball striking. He's much more of an around the green type player, short course. Just don't see the fit there. Ryan Fox, 6% per or 6.5 per Fantasy National, 10% per Gabe source. But even so, even at 10%, this is a very talented player. The off the tee is a little shaky, yes. He plays longer courses very well. He's got plenty of distance. So in a very forgiving course, a player has a lot of distance but struggles off the tee. That's generally accuracy at a very forgiving driving course. I kind of like Ryan Fox, especially if the par fours play more important than I think they do. So Fox is interesting. Hitsatsune, okay. Again, kind of like Eric Van Rooyen, kind of take it or leave it. Brandon Wu, probably going to be popular, but probably for good reason. He's been in third and second in his 2 years at Vedanta. He's also played the comparison courses very, very well, particularly Puerto Rico. Plenty of irons. Plays long course. I mean, you see the prowess on long courses. Brandon Wu is somebody that I'm going to use quite a bit of. And I'm actually a little bit less on Mark Hubbard. I really worry about his off the tee game. Not only is he not terribly accurate recently, he doesn't have a lot of distance either. It has not stopped him from being pretty good here at Vedanta, and it hasn't stopped him from being pretty good at these comparison courses, these Paspalum Caribbean courses. And those are the only two metrics that are bad. Everything else is a pretty solid green for Mark Hubbard, but I'm going to be a little bit less on Mark Hubbard than what the 7th ranking is showing. I do worry about the distance and his off the tee game. So in the 9Ks, I'm going to make Jaeger number 1, even if he is the most popular. He might be number 1 in my rank in my mind in totality. Love Stefan Jaeger this week. I'll make Brandon Wu number 2 only because of the cheaper price and the amount of uniqueness you're gaining off of Taylor Pendrith, because I really like Taylor Pendrith. So I'll go Brandon Wu 2nd, Taylor Pendrith 3rd, Ryan Fox 4th. I'll use a little Van Rooyen. I'll use probably a little Hitsatsune. I'm just not excited about it, but it should be okay. I'm going to try to limit my use of Hubbard because I do worry a little bit about his off the tee game. Mitchell, no thanks. Rogers is fine. Okay. Just I don't feel I don't have a strong lean to or for or against Patrick Rogers. It's fine. So there's a look at the 9Ks. We'll move to the 8s. Doug Gim, again, I talked about him. Anytime putting is not involved, he's going to rise drastically in the rankings. Elite ball striker, actually number 1 in this field in par 5s. He does struggle with some distance, though. That might come back to haunt him this week, but he's been very, very good otherwise. He's going to be very, very popular as well. Doug Gim, 11% per Gabe source, 14% here. So, split the two, it's 12.5%. So he's not exactly the most chalky, but he's not unique either. I do think Doug Gim is a good play, but I think you're going to be able to find some uniqueness elsewhere, mainly right below him here. Cameron Champ. Love Cameron Champ this week. Again, another one of these players where if putting is not in the mixed condition model, he's going to rise drastically. Number 6 off the tee, number 2 driving distance. Irons are actually haven't been too bad lately, and you see the prowess with the long proximities. He's also top 10 both years here at Vedanta. I really like Cameron Champ this week. I will be extremely overweight on Cameron Champ. Extremely overweight. He's the first name that I clicked on the wagers as well. I just love everything about Cameron Champ this week. I think he's going to play very well. Rye, interesting, but lacks some distance. So, I mean, elite ball striker, absolutely, but lacks some distance. The long irons as well, not the best. So he is going to be unique. So hovering around kind of 8% or so. I'll probably have him a little bit, but I do have some concerns. Like a little bit with Doug Gim, and especially with like Mark Hubbard, the lack of distance. Now, Aaron Rye is very accurate, but that's kind of mitigated here since these fairways are so forgiving. And Rye just does not have a lot of distance, so I think that comes back to hurt him a little bit. Michael Kim rated 3rd. I don't think I'm that high on him, but again, he's been really good. He has a lot of really good statistics. 63rd here is his worst. Top 10 on bogey avoidance long courses. Top 10 on par 3s. A lot going for Michael Kim. Looking over here, trying to find his performance in or on these comparison courses. So he's played Puerto Rico very well, pretty middling at Corrales, and last fall at the Worldwide Technologies was a top 25. So he's played these Caribbean events pretty well. There's quite a bit to like here with Michael Kim. He's just not going to be all that unique. 14.5 per Fantasy National, 12% per Gabe Source. So McNeely could be interesting. I'm not there with Eckroat. Although the long iron proximities are pretty good. Maybe I should think about Eckroat a little bit more, but I don't know. It's a gut feeling because his irons are better than this. The more I talk through it, the more I'm starting to come around on Austin Eckroat. 10% here per Fantasy National, 10% per Gabe Source. So it's not great, but I don't hate it. That's somebody you could probably target in the low 8s if you're not as sold on Michael Kim. But in the 8Ks, I'm going to use some Doug Gim, although I do have some concerns. I love Cameron Champ, going to be extremely overweight there. Rye, maybe a little bit, but this is kind of an area that I've been ignoring. So that probably tells you the kind of lineups that I've been building. If I like several players in the 9s, and I'm going to use Finau and Dietrich and Højgaard, it tells you the kind of lineups I'm probably building. Moving into the upper 7s, a lot of people like Alejandro Tosti. He is sitting 9% per Gabe Source, 12.5 per Fantasy National. I guess I understand why. It's the off the tee. 10th there, 9th in distance. He's also really good with the long irons, but I don't know. This feels like a bold fade that could really work in your favor if you're willing to do it. I might have some FOMO here and have him in a lineup, but I'm definitely not as high as on Tosti as others. Instead, I'm going 100 less. I'm all about some Nate Lashley this week. Love Nate Lashley. You see, 4th in greens on long courses. He's the #1 bogey avoider on long courses. He takes advantage of these par 5s. He's been very good here at Vedanta. He's played here both years. He's averaged a top 25 finish. And he's the #1 player on these Caribbean Paspalum events. Puerto Rico, he's demolished. Averaged a 6th place finish in 3 years. Averaged a 6th place finish. Been a little bit less at Corrales, but he's 2 for 3 there. Top 10 the Worldwide Technologies. Love Nate Lashley this week. I will be extremely overweight on Nate Lashley as well. So Cameron Champ and Nate Lashley are 2 players that if they don't play well, I'm going to lose. I'm going to be extremely overweight on them. Lashley 10% per Fantasy National. Per Gabe Source, only 6%. Love that. Even if he's at 10%, I'll be extremely overweight. Love him. Vincent Norman, I know I mentioned him quite a few times. He hasn't panned out. This does feel like a very good fit for Vincent Norman. You think about his win. It's the Barbasol. What takes precedence there? It's all about the ball striking. Off the tee, 8th. 7th in distance. 11th at the 175 to 200. I do like Vincent Norman this week. I will use some Vincent Norman. I think this is where you can gain a whole lot of uniqueness on some of your fellow contestants. I don't think he's going to be too popular because a lot of people are going to Johnny Vegas for good reason. I am too. This is some more chalk that I will eat. I really like Johnny Vegas. You'll see him in the betting card. See him probably in the top DFS players. Although this projected ownership could be a little bit prohibiting. But top 5 off the tee, 10th in greens, 21st in bogey avoidance on long courses. He just plays long courses really well because of his prowess off the tee, fires par 5s. Really like Johnny Vegas. Moving into the mid 7s, Smalley, okay, I guess. Nothing astronomical here, but he's played long courses well. It's another one of these players that, with no putting into the mixed condition model, really rises. I'm probably not as high as 11th on Smalley, but I think it could be interesting because he is a green and regulation machine. He's just so good generally with the irons. So take a look at Alex Smalley. I like some others in the mid 7s, particularly Lashley, if you consider 77 mid. Johnny Vegas, Vincent Norman. I like others in the mid 7s, but Smalley could be interesting. Carson Young getting a lot of attention per Fantasy National. Okay. Good ball striker. Hits plenty of greens when it's long courses. Plays par 3s well. I do worry that his par 5 performance isn't great, but he's getting a lot of attention, I would imagine, because he's very good with his long irons. That's what you have to be here. So, I don't hate it. I like the player. I don't like the ownership. I'll put it to you that way. So, if you feel like you can find some uniqueness elsewhere, Carson Young's probably a decent play. Moving into the low 7s, Spawn and Sig were both top 20 in my rankings. I don't know if I'm that confident, mainly because both of them lack distance. Sig doesn't take advantage of the par 5s at all. Now, Spawn has a lot going for him other than the distance. Top 20 in par 5s. Top 10 on both greens and bogey avoidance on long courses. So Spawn's got a lot going for him other than the fact that he lacks some distance. So I'm sure I'll have some JJ Spawn. I just don't think I'm as high on him as 13th. Everybody seems to be targeting Sam Stevens in the low sevens. Again, for good reason. Another one of these players that has played extremely well on these comparison courses. Taking a look at Sam Stevens. He played to a 15th finish at Puerto Rico and a third place finish at Corrales. Comparison courses. He's not going to be unique by any means. 12.5% per Gabe Source, 14% for Fantasy National. Not going to be unique, but a player that I really, really like this week. The irons are better than what's being suggested here, I think, but it's a lot about his off the tee game. Top 25 off the tee, 10th in distance, and even the long irons are good as well. So I like Sam Stevens. Just understand he's not going to be as unique. So there's a look at the bottom of the 7Ks. I'll do some 6Ks here fairly quickly, and I do have a couple of 5Ks that I want to mention to you all. But in the 6Ks, 6,800, I love Joseph Bramlett. Don't care, even if he is one of the most chalky 6K plays. He's at 8% per Gabe Source, 9.5 here at Fantasy National. Love Joseph Bramlett. All about the ball striking. Pretty good ball with the irons, but elite off the tee. 12th and off the tee, 4th and fourth in distance. You see the performance on long courses. I love everything about Joseph Bramlett this week. Right under him, even though he didn't rate out well, I kind of like Harry Hall. We had a little bit of discussion Monday night about Harry Hall. I do like Harry Hall a little bit. I do want to mention him, even though he's not rating out well. Sami Valimaki, I've mentioned him a couple of times. A very, very talented young Finnish player from Finland. Very good on the DP World Tour. Look, the ball striking is really, really good. He plays long courses well. Again, these are metrics taken from his very small sample sizes in majors. And he's actually performed okay in them, at least statistically. 22nd in distance. The long iron proximities, solid. I'm going to be using quite a bit of Sami Valimaki this week. There's been a lot of attention paid to him, so he might not be as unique as you think. You see 7% here, 5.5% per Gabe Source. Valimaki might not be as unique as you think, but I think this is a pretty solid play if you're willing to come down into the sixes. Couple more here. I can't say the mad scientist play just yet because he's in the 5Ks. Rafael Campos is someone to take a look at. He has generally played these comparison courses very, very well. So he's 4 for 4 at the Puerto Rico. He's 3 for 4 at Corrales. Solid performances. He loves these Caribbean-style events. Lots to like there with Rafael Campos. You see he hadn't played Vedanta. I'll give it a casual mention. I'm sure I'll have him maybe a time or two. I mean, you see, decent ball striker. Decent on these long courses. Particularly in the bogey avoidance. His glaring weakness has been the par 4 performance. And those are pretty mitigated here. I figured I would mention Rafael Campos at 6,300. I'm much higher on Bramlett and Sami Valimaki up top. Even Harry Hall. But I think Rafael Campos deserves a mention. Moving into the 5s, I do have 2 players that I want to mention to you all. If you are really trying to go for the Tony Finau, Stefan Jaeger, or Tony Finau and Højgaard or Finau Dietrich lineups, if you're willing to come into the 5Ks, and I wouldn't do it much, but if you are, there's 2 players I want to mention. The first is MJ Duffy. This is all based on one thing and one thing only, his off the tee game. You see a lot of other stuff is pretty darn bad. The irons have been bad. Performance on long courses is bad. But he's first off the tee, 35th in distance. He's been pretty good with his long irons too. So You're playing that for the long course narrative. I'm not in love with it. I would do it maybe once if I'm trying to get the greediest of greedy lineups in there. I wanted to mention MJ Duffy, but the mad scientist play for the week, and one that I'm going to be using quite a bit because he's top 20 in my rankings, Callum Tarrant. At 5,600, you're getting a guy that is top 25 in off the tee and top 10 in irons. He hits plenty of greens on long courses. He's got plenty of distance. Now, his issue, he's better generally on the par fours, and we just talked that they're mitigated. But I am going to be using some Callum Tarrant this week. So that's the mad scientist play. But there's a look at the price board where it seems, at least per Fantasy National, where our fellow contestants are going, and then try to mention a few of these other players and their projected ownerships per Gabe's secondary source. But there's a look at what I think will be the top pivots and top fades. Let's start making some lineups. We're going to start with tiers contests for those who play tiers. So in tier 1, we have Tony Finau, Emiliano Grillo, and Nicolai Højgaard. To me, this is a pretty easy Tony Finau. If you're wanting to try to find all the uniqueness you can, if you know you're going to be taking some chalk in other tiers, I don't hate Højgaard, but I think it's a pretty clear Tony Finau in tier 1. I want zero part of Grillo. So it's either Finau or Højgaard. A pretty clear Finau for me. Tier 2, Thorbjorn Olesen, Dietrich, Keith Mitchell, Jaeger, and Patrick Rogers. And again, I mentioned the possibility of taking Højgaard because I would take Stefan Jaeger in this tier. Even with Tony Finau, I'm going to take Stefan Jaeger, and I'm going to try to find my uniqueness elsewhere. Dietrich, fine, in great form. He's also played these comparison courses well. And as I mentioned in classic lineups, Olesen's kind of intriguing. We just don't have a lot of statistics on him, but he's pretty intriguing. But I'm going to take Stefan Jaeger, probably my number one, at least in my mind, number one player this week. And I'll just take Jaeger in tier 2. Tier 3, Taylor Pendrith, EVR, Mackenzie Hughes, Ryan Fox, and Ryo Hitsatsune. This is where I'm going to get into a little bit of trouble because I really want to take Taylor Pendrith, but that top 3 of going Finau, Jaeger, Pendrith is going to be so popular, you're not going to be able to gain much on your fellow contestants in your tiers contests. So this is where I'm going to try and be a little bit unique. I'm going to take Ryan Fox. I believe in the talent of the player. Even though he hadn't played Vedanta, I think he's going to be unique enough. And, par 4 performance, even though they're mitigated here, is elite. He's been okay with the long irons. He's just plenty of distance. Takes advantage of par 5s. I like Ryan Fox, and even though the off the tee number is bad, he's got plenty of distance. These are forgiving fairways. It's a forgiving course off the tee. So I'm going to take a chance with Ryan Fox in tier 3, give it a little bit of uniqueness. If you have not taken Finau and or Jaeger, I would take Pendrith. But for me, because I've taken Finau and Jaeger, I'll take Fox. Tier 4, Brandon Wu, Mark Hubbard, Davis Thompson, Doug Gim, Jake Knapp, Cameron Champ, Aaron Rai. Normally, I talk about how a putter can take you out of a tournament, and that's very, very dangerous in a tiers contest. A little bit different. You can probably withstand that a little bit more in Classic. I'm just so extremely confident in Cameron Champ's performance this week, even if the putter stays Cameron Champ-like. I'm going to take Cameron Champ in tier 4. I think it's between Champ and Brandon Wu. Both of them have elite, and I mean elite, prior course history here. They're both running roughly the same in terms of ownership. I'll take Champ. Brandon Wu is a fine play. I think it's pretty clear between those two. Doug Gim would be third in this tier, but I think he's pretty clearly behind these two by a decent margin. So give me Cam Champ in tier 4. Tier 5, Charlie Hoffman, Justin Subb, Michael Kim, Matt McNeely, Austin Eckroat, S.H. Kim, and Alejandro Tosti. Tosti's okay. We talked about Austin Eckroat, and I should be a little bit higher on him. Michael Kim, kind of interesting. He's probably going to be the chalky one in this tier. So I think I might take Austin Eckroat, take a little bit of a chance here. I think it's between these two for tiers. But give me Austin Eckroat, try to gain just that much more uniqueness off of my fellow contestants in tiers since I'm going Finau and Jaeger. Finally, tier 6, Nate Lashley, Chesson Hadley, Vincent Norman, Johnny Vegas, Alex Smalley, KH Lee, and Bobby Mack. For me, I'm going Nate Lashley. I'm not thinking too hard about it, but man, Johnny Vegas is interesting as well. He's just going to be more popular. So I'll take Nate Lashley. Johnny Vegas is a very, very good play as well, and I do like Vincent Norman, but I think he's third behind those other two. I'll take Lashley for the uniqueness. So this tier's construction goes tier 1, Tony Finau, tier 2, Stefan Jaeger, tier 3, Ryan Fox, tier 4, Cameron Champ, tier 5, Austin Eckroat, and tier 6, we go Nate Lashley. All right, we'll move to Classic. And these big GPPs, I say big GPPs, but, you know, the biggest contests of the week, even though it's a pretty down week, at least on DraftKings it is, in terms of prizes. Let's see where our fellow contestants are going and see how we can maneuver around it. First question that everybody's going to be asking themselves, or at least I envision them asking themselves, if they're going to play Tony Finau or not. So let's make a lineup with Finau, and then we'll make one without him. Tony Finau, 12,000, very prohibitive. A whole lot of ownership here. It looks like at the bottom, most of our fellow contestants are bottoming out at Sam Stevens. And that's kind of checking out in per Gabe Source as well. Joseph Bramlett is at 8% per Gabe Source in the 6Ks. Let's try to bottom this out at Sam Stevens. If I could spell Stevens. There we go. You see, that doesn't give them a whole lot of wiggle room here. I highly doubt they're going to be able to go into the 9Ks. And if they go into the 8s, it's going to have to be in the lower, gosh dang it, in the lower portion of the 8s. If they do, somebody like Michael Kim, maybe Tosti as second, but I'll try to fit Michael Kim in there for them at 82. We're in the mid 7s now. They could probably fit an upper 7, mid 7, and a low 7 now. So let's go Davis. No, I'm sorry. Looking at the wrong thing there. Tosti's at 9% per Gabe Source, and Fantasy National Leagues of 12.5. I imagine he's probably going to gain a little bit of momentum, considering I've seen quite a lot of people talk about him this week. Again, I'm not as high on him. And then we got two players here in the mid 7s that seems to be getting ignored quite a bit. Johnny Vegas, perhaps, at least per Fantasy National, members are using Johnny Vegas, but he's not getting used a lot per Gabe Source. Now Carson Young's even less per Gabe Source. So at least per Fantasy National, we would go Johnny Vegas. Definitely spelled that wrong. There we go. Leaves us 73. What's Carson Young? He's probably 74, knowing my luck. Called it. This would be Carson Young. So this is 100 over. Let's move. Let's see. Michael Kim is 12%. So he's getting some love. Maybe it's not Tosti. Yeah, I don't know. Take this for what you will. I know this is 100 over, but this is generally about the most common lineup I could see. Finau, and then coming down into the low 8s. Again, because I don't see too many people jumping down into the 6Ks this week. Joseph Bramlett would be it. So if we were willing to do that, it would go something like this. Bramlett and then Sam Stevens. Probably Johnny Vegas. And this frees up quite a bit more for them. Well, 83 to the 82. Suh's not getting much. Yeah, let's just do Tosti. Now that one's a little bit under, thanks to Bramlett, or moving down for Bramlett. But there's probably a pretty common shell of a Finau lineup. Probably going Finau all the way down into the low 8s would be my guess. And then rounding out with the 7s, maybe going into the 6s for a Joseph Bramlett. The other way that it appears these lineups are going, if they forego Tony Finau, they're going something to the effect of Højgaard, maybe Jaeger. Yeah, that's gonna be pretty tough. But those two are the second and third most projected owned players per Gabe's source. You see, Jaeger is actually projected more than Finau per Fantasy National. So maybe it's not Højgaard, maybe it's Jaeger. Could be Dietrich as well. But let's probably start this with Jaeger. Taylor Pendrith is getting a whole lot of attention as well. So Jaeger, Pendrith, they might be in the 8Ks. Like Davis Thompson's getting a lot of attention as well. And then again, rounding out the bottom 7s with a Sam Stevens. Nobody else really garnering a whole lot of attention here. Per Gabe's source, you've got Sam Stevens at 12.5, Chris Gotterup at 10%. So perhaps he's gaining, and maybe he would be in this as well. 75 would be Smalley or Cage Lee. This would be Carson Young per Fantasy National members. That's looking like a probably a fairly common shell for those who are choosing to not play Tony Finau. Using, a couple of 9s or maybe a Dietrich and a 9. I don't know if they'd be able to go Højgaard Jaeger. They'd probably have to go something like Højgaard Pendrith and then come off of Davis Thompson. But Davis Thompson's getting a lot of attention as well. Eric Van Rooyen would certainly fit in this Taylor Pendrith spot. So how are we going to maneuver around all this chalk? Well, first, I'll show you the lineups that can get really, really unique. I don't particularly like them because I am really, really high on Finau. If you want to get pretty darn unique, as much as I don't, well, let's not use Jaeger. Let's do Thomas Dietrich. I don't have anything against Dietrich. He's still going to be somewhat popular. But we'll go Dietrich, and we'll drop down to Ryan Fox. Again, somebody that is a little speculative, but all the talent in the world. I like Brandon Wu potentially in this spot as well. Moving down into the 8s, all about some Cameron Champ. But I'm really kind of ignoring the 8s other than Cameron Champ. I'll use a little bit of Doug Ginn, but he's getting a lot of attention. Gosh dang it. He's getting a lot of attention as well. But I will certainly be overweight on Cameron Champ. And then mixing in, the bottom 7s here. I like Johnny Vegas, but we can look at Vincent Norman. JJ Spawn has played these long courses really, really well. Someone who's probably going to be pretty darn unique. So let's try 75 or 76 Norman. Yep. 76. JJ Spawn's at 72. Exactly. Leaves us 72% again. And look, we still have a whole lot of percentage to play with. We still have 7,200 to play with. Like, we have a very unique lineup here that, I mean, Dietrich's one of the tournament favorites. Cameron Champ has played extremely well here. So I'm really confident in that. Spawn has played these long courses pretty darn well. Winner at the Valero, another long course. To round this out, pick kind of who you want, like Dylan Wu at 6,900 could be pretty darn interesting. Sam Stevens obviously is going to be the most popular, but a very good play for obvious reasons. Like, if we use Sam Stevens, we're probably, we're not even hitting the 10%. We're right at that 10%. We're probably looking at a unique lineup here, more than likely. Of course, you can move any of this around, but I'm just really, really high on Cameron Champ. I'm using Vincent Norman instead of Johnny Vegas to gain a little bit of uniqueness, but this could easily be Johnny Vegas, who I'm very high on as well. You're going to get a little bit more popularity there, but you're still looking at probably, I can't say a unique lineup, but a very, very less common lineup than what you would think. Thanks to Dietrich and Fox, Champ doesn't seem to be garnering a whole lot of attention. And JJ Spawn's really kind of the key to this little build here, being very, very unique and being in the top 15 in my rankings. But the lineups that I've been going most often, I've just been greedy. I've been ultra greedy. Been trying to get as much Tony Finau and Stefan Jaeger in this, because I told you I was not afraid to go down into the 5Ks, let alone the 6s. I don't know if I'm going to use a 5 and a 6K. I am confident in Bramlett. I do like Sami Valimaki. I don't have any problem using Callum Tarrant a couple of times, especially if I'm trying to get so extremely greedy up top with who I think are two of the the top two players in this field, Finau and Jaeger. And we're still around that mid-7s, that 7,500 price. I love me some Nate Lashley this week. I'll be extremely overweight on Nate Lashley. This could easily be a Johnny Vegas. Carson Young is fine. I'd probably throw Vincent Norman into this. If I wanted to get even more greedy, if you wanted to go a 5 and a 6, you can throw Sami Valimaki into this. Well, until I spell his name right. This could be Bramlett. This could be Sami Valimaki. I just mentioned Dylan Wu could be interesting. But, now you're setting yourself up to where you might be able to take it 8K like a Cameron Champ that I want. Don't know if you'll be able to go into the 9s as much. Cameron Champ. I know Gabe's pretty high on Charlie Hoffman. I'm not there, but maybe you are. If you want the precision of Aaron Rye, maybe like Michael Kim, Austin Eckroat, somebody that we have that I keep forgetting about, but could certainly fit. And then 7,300, of course, JJ Spawn, Sam Stevens. If I find 100 more, I could go to Carson Young. I'll use. I'll just use Sam Stevens because I do think it's a good play. It's just not as unique. And look, I understand that percentage looks awful. It's because you got all of this at the top. You're looking at probably a potentially unique lineup here. If you're willing to go down to a Callum Tarrant and a Sami Valimaki, going to a 5 and a 6, you're probably looking at a unique lineup. Maybe duplicated a couple times, but if you're going to be ultra greedy, I think this is the way to go. To go Finau Jaeger, Finau Pendrith maybe. I don't want any part of Griot. Or maybe you can go like Højgaard Dietrich, Højgaard Jaeger. But I think that's the way to go for your extremely greedy stars and scrubs lineups. That's it for the show this evening. We had a couple of votes in the poll question. Who, if any of these, are you using in one done? We had one for Tony Finau, one for Nikolai Højgaard. My one and done pick, I have used Tony Finau already. He did perform very, very well when I took him. I believe it was at the Amex. So I can't complain because I believe he was top 10 or something there at the Amex. So I won't complain about that. I'm going to take Cameron Champ. I was fortunate that I took Will Zalatoris last week. That tied for second really catapulted me in my division of one and done. So feeling pretty good about that. I'm going to take Cameron Champ as my one and done. A lot because I don't envision using him or having an opportunity to use him later on this year. This seems like a very prime spot to use Cameron Champ. So I'm going to take Cameron Champ as my one and done. I do think Højgaard has the potential to be used later in the year, or else I would think about using like a Højgaard or a Jaeger, but I also think Jaeger could play his way into some of these bigger tournaments with bigger payouts. So I'm going to take Cameron Champ as my one and done. Well, that's going to be it for the show this evening. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, watching, listening, supporting the channel by liking the video, commenting, and subscribing. I always appreciate it. Reminder that if you have success, wagers, DFS, doesn't have to be golf. Maybe your fantasy NBA, fantasy NHL, fantasy baseball is going to be starting up soon. If you're a member of the community and have success, please let me know via comments or in chat, or reach out to me on social media. Would love to be able to shout out members of the community who have success, like we were able to do last week with a lot of the success we had for the Genesis. We're going to try and keep that momentum, make it 2 straight weeks of very solid performances this week for the Mexico Open at Vedanta. So for all the wagers you've made this week for the Mexico Open, for all the DFS contests you play this week for the Mexico Open, for this weekend and every weekend, may all your bets be profitable.